As guitarists move away from pattern-based learning, chord charts, scale diagrams, just sort of dots on the neck, and move toward a more holistic understanding of what's going on here and understanding why the guitar works the way it does and what its capabilities are. And specifically, when guitarists start building the capability of creating musical constructs on their own. Gee, I need a minor 11 voicing. How am I going to build that? When guitarists start to build that capability, managing the relationship between the G and the B string, that B string being tuned down, becomes very important. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you're going to learn a couple of exercises that will help you manage the B string. The B string, as you may know already, is tuned down a half step in comparison to the other strings. The guitar is tuned mostly in perfect fourths, except for that G to B string relationship. And then, of course, from B to E, it returns to perfect fourths. This can be a hassle. With pattern-based learning, just chord diagrams or scale diagrams, oh, this is a major chord, this is a major scale. It doesn't really matter so much, and you just sort of are a slave to the dots, and you're like, well, this is just what it looks like. And so, but what happens is you miss the opportunity to understand what's going on there. So as scale shapes change and chord shapes change, you're sort of like asleep to what's actually going on as those shapes and constructs move across the G and the B string. So here's what we're going to do. Today I'm going to explain why the B string is tuned down in the first place. It's not a big mystery, but it's an interesting reason. There's a couple of reasons why, and it's sort of interesting and important to know. And then we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to show you a couple of exercises to do to just start to see and get connected to that intervallic change. Intervallic meaning intervals, right? Being made up of intervals. The intervals are just the distances between notes. The guitar is tuned in perfect fourths. The perfect fourth is a distance, it's an interval. However, that G and the B string are tuned in a major third, and that's a different interval. So we're just going to put some exercises on the fretboard to see and just notice, oh, that's different. It's the same on all these other strings, but when I cross that G string and cross over into the B, it changes. So I'm going to show you all about that. Okay, so first, why is the B string tuned down in the first place? Turns out it's a compromise between two different things. One's very musical, how to control the intervals that are actually on the open strings and why. And the other is comfort-wise. So intervallically, like from a standpoint of intervals, if you tune a 6-string instrument in perfect fourths all the way across, in other words, we didn't have this B string tuned down, the strings would be E, A, D, G, C, F. Now that sounds like it would work out fine, but if that was the case, your two high and low open strings would sound like this, because you'd have an F on the top, right? Now, for reasons that may or may not be obvious, you don't want a half step in your open string sort of architecture. It's just not cool. It's going to make things hard eventually, especially if you're voicing chords all the way across, which we do with bar chords. So there's that. The other one is that as you tune an instrument in perfect fourths, and as the scale gets longer, your ability to reach across the strings and create intervallic designs across strings becomes harder and harder. So here's the perfect example. Violin has a very short scale. So as you play it, it's easy to reach all the notes. Viola, a little bit larger, but it's just, basically the same type of thing. Cellos and upright basses, as that scale increases, they have to be held upright, so that you can navigate those distances with your arm instead of just your wrist and fingers. And that's because of that intervallic design of the perfect fourth and moving between the strings. So on a guitar, which is a longer scale than a violin, it's a little bit hard. It's why those distances are harder to grasp, right, across strings. So one of the reasons that the B string's tuned down is to allow the physicality of the instrument to be a little bit more a little bit easier to manipulate. So the perfect example is the bar chord. If the pattern of perfect fourth tuning continued across the B string, we wouldn't be able to play bar chords. That distance would be even harder to reach, and we wouldn't be able to have those two notes on the outside that mirror the root. A perfect example of this is a major 7 chord, played from the D string root, root 3, 5, 7. It's perfectly laid out so that I've got one finger per fret and one finger per string. It's sort of the poster child of why we made this change a few hundred years ago. Okay, so that's why the B string's tuned the way it is. Combination of is it musically convenient and is it easier to play those intervals across strings on an instrument that's tuned in perfect fourths. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in. We're going to zoom in and I'm going to show you basically a couple of exercises to start to see how that B string changes the intervallic design, both harmonically as well as melodically. Let's get started. Let's figure this little beastie out. B string's tuned down a half step. It's a bit of an issue. It's a bit of a problem. Obviously, from what I just said, it solves some other problems and it's a compromise, right? But it does put us in a little bit of a bind when we're trying to map musical relationships across these strings. Like suddenly there's like this speed bump, right? Like, ah. Meanwhile, when you learn patterns, right? When you're just playing patterns, you've just learned this as a bunch of notes, right? And it doesn't really matter because you can just repeat the pattern, right? Just play the dots. What happens is you miss an opportunity to understand what's going on underneath your fingers so that if you ever have to replicate that pattern in a different situation, on a different set of strings, you will be unable to because you haven't paid attention to that B string. So it becomes important. First things first, let's just state the obvious here. This is the way the guitar is tuned. E, A, D, G, B, E. If it was tuned in perfect fourths, it would be E, A, D, G, C, F. Which, hey, it's not so bad. But when you tune a 6-string instrument in perfect fourths, you get this relationship on the 2 outside strings of a half step. This relationship's a little bit easier to take. And it facilitates bar chords because now you've got the 2 outside strings playing the same note. So, compromise of getting the musicality of the open strings to at least be something that's not horrible, and sort of playability, getting these relationships to be easy to play on the guitar, to be easy to play on an instrument that has a little bit of a longer scale and is tuned in perfect fourths. Okay, so we reviewed the letters E, A, D, G, B, E. We should all know those. That's great. We saw what it would have been if it was perfect fourths. Now let's just pull a Neil deGrasse Tyson on this thing and just prove it. Let's just prove it to ourselves. We're going to look across the guitar in sets of 2 strings. We're going to go through each set of 2 strings and just prove it out. E to A. E, F, G, A. E to A is a perfect fourth. A to D. A, B, C, D. A to D is a perfect fourth. D to G. D, E, F, G. D to G is a perfect fourth. G to B. G, A, B. That's a major third. And now back to the B string, B to E, B, C, D, E. B to E, we're back to perfect fourth. So it's just that B and G string, the relationship between the G and the B string, that is sort of like the stumbling block, the speed bump, what's going on? It was a compromise, so we got to pay for it in some way. When you're learning scales or anything, chords, and you're just learning them as dots, you don't need to pay attention to what's going on. You're just regurgitating the dots. Here's how the scale's written. Success. But you miss the opportunity to understand what's going on the B string, and thereby, if you are ever in a position where you have to replicate that relationship, starting and ending on a different string, crossing that G and B string relationship in a different spot, you're done. You're baked, right? Because you didn't pay attention. You didn't bring that information with you. So as guitar players, like I said at the very top, as we start to understand the instrument and the capability, we start to get the capability to build things on our own, we need this information. So I've developed a little quick exercise. This is nothing special, but it has dramatic impact. So just bear with me because it's going to seem simple and you're going to go, oh, that's nothing. But bear with me and bear this out and watch it play out. We're going to explore the guitar in sets of 2 strings using a very simple and beautiful sounding musical construct, which is playing a major scale through the first 4 degrees and then returning to the root. That's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then we're going to play the interval of a major third, a perfect fourth, and then a major third. Okay, that's a lot of talking. Let me show you what it sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. Okay, that's it. Now we're going to take that and we're just going to play it across the sets of 2 strings. We just did it for the E string. We're going to do it for the A string. Notice how we're not talking about what key we're in. We're not talking about what note names are. We're just looking at this relationship. Here it is again. Starting on the A string, major scale, first 4 notes, back down again, major third, perfect fourth, major third. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. Notice how that perfect fourth, the notes are right next to each other, just like they are on the nut. That's expressing that perfect fourth tuning. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Same thing on the next set of strings. Right? No problem. Now we get to the G and the B string. Now we're at that set of strings that's tuned in a major third. So it's got to change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. Notice now how the major third has the bar in it because these 2 strings are tuned in a major third. Now we go to the B and the E string, which return to being tuned in a perfect fourth. And you can see we've returned to that same pattern for the other sets of 2 strings that are tuned in fourths. Okay, seems sort of novel and silly, but you saw that difference when we got to the G and the B string. I'm going to do the same exact exercise, and now I'm going to do it in 1 key. We're going to stay in the key of A. Starts in the same spot, because we happen to be on the 5th fret, E string. That's an A note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. We want to find that same relationship on the A string, A on the A string, way up here on the 12th fret. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. Same thing for the D string. There's an A on the D string, 7th fret. Now A on the G string. Down an octave, it's a little nicer to hear it down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, major third, perfect fourth, major third. Now we need to find the A on the B string. That's right up here. These are tuned in fourths again, so we return to that other relationship. Now, this would seem fairly simple, right? It's a simple exercise. The real gold here is staying awake while you do it, right? Don't let it fall into the habit of just being a blob of notes. By manufacturing the need to understand that you're playing the major third and the perfect fourth, you force yourself to stay awake. You force yourself to pay attention. Do this exercise through a couple of keys. I just did it for you chromatically and in 1 key. That's my job. I give you the information. It's your job now to sort of take that through the circle of fifths or find it all over the neck. Just do it in the key of D or in the key of G or in the key of F sharp. Stay awake through the whole thing. Once you do that a couple of times, your relationship to the B string, that G and B string relationship, your ability to manage it is completely healed. You never have that experience of like, oh, here comes the B string. What am I going to do? This exercise gets you the confidence and capability to manage that relationship in any way you need to. All right, so there you go. That B string, sort of an asset, really, if you think about it, allows us to do stuff like bar chords, etc., without too much difficulty, because it's a 6-string instrument. And again, if you tune a 6-string instrument in fourths, you get that half step on the 2 outside strings. We don't want that. You just don't want that. But interesting that these exercises allow you to see the difference between the major third. Those melodic ideas about just taking that relationship and scooting it up and just seeing how it changes from any of the pairs of strings that is tuned in a perfect fourth to that G and B string relationship, and seeing how you have to move that relationship when it crosses the B string. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I've tabbed these examples out. They're nice exercises to get under your fingers if you just really want to control that relationship of the G and the B string. The tabs are on Patreon. I've linked that in the description below. Head on over there if you'd like to grab the tabs, or if you just want to support the channel. That's a great way to do it. And if you do, I thank you in advance. Can't think of anything better to do with my time than to spend it here sharing this information with you. Okay, so grab those exercises. Just get to visualize them across that B string so that you can manage that relationship much more consciously, right? When you're building stuff that you need, coming across scales, transposing a melody, moving chord voicings around, this becomes an important thing to do. All right, I hope you enjoy this, and I'll see you next time.